everybody. I'm author Deb Engle, author of Be the Light That You Are. And I'm so pleased today to be talking with Jon Mundy, who is here today to talk with us about the power of the mind. Hi, Jon.
Hi, Deb. Nice talking to you.
Always good to see you. We were talking the other day, and I mentioned that you've been a guest in our home a couple of times, which has been a pleasure. And we've had such great conversations around the dinner table. So I'm just really pleased that we get to do this now in front of a camera and share it with the rest of the world, too, because you have so much to tell us about the power of the mind. You are an author and lecturer, and you're known around the world. But for people who may not be familiar with your work, I'd like to do a formal introduction here. So I've got a few notes, and I'll just do that. You are an author, lecturer. You're the publisher of Miracles Magazine, and you're executive director of All Faiths Seminary International in New York City. You're a retired university professor. You taught classes in philosophy, religion, and psychology. And you're the author of 12 books, including A Course in Mysticism and Miracles, Lesson 101, Perfect Happiness, and the classic best-selling book, Living A Course in Miracles, which has been translated into at least 8 languages, maybe more by now. You also travel all over the world, lecturing and presenting workshops based on A Course in Miracles and other teachings. And I've also had the pleasure of you experiencing when you get into your alter ego, which is Dr. Baba Jon Mundy, stand-up philosopher and comedian. Yeah. Anything else that you'd like viewers to know about you?
That's enough.
Well, you've got a long resume, and that's why when I thought about who would be good to talk about the power of the mind, you were the first person who came to my mind, because I think you've got as deep or deeper an understanding and a grasp of this as anybody. I'd like to talk about, in Be the Light That You Are, I talk about the fact that we have 2 minds, and that we have such creative power. We literally can create anything that we want to in this world. But we do have 2 minds, the ego or smaller mind, and then the higher mind. For people who may not be very familiar with that idea, could you describe what those 2 minds are and what the differences are between them?
Sure. And a good analogy, which we would all identify with immediately, is a cartoon of a devil sitting on one shoulder and an angel sitting on the other shoulder. Right. So we could really kind of think of that. Those are the 2 minds in the sense of one mind is the ego mind, which is the mind which is separate. Now, by separate, I mean, let's go back to the Adam and Eve story very briefly. It's a good mythology because it sort of tells us it's in a mythological context, but then we demythologize it. We understand what it's saying. And what it's saying is that someplace in time, by someplace in time, I mean the whole existence of time is part of the problem. The coming into time. We stepped into time and out of eternity. Stepping out of eternity and into time and into bodies and into an identity in relationship to an outside, a world, right? And then we created our own world. With the Garden of Eden story, God did not kick Adam and Eve out of the garden. We left. We left on our own accord. We said, thank you very much, God. I'd really rather do it myself. And God, being free will and recognizing that we have free will, said, I can't stop you. Fine, go ahead. I mean, but if it's like you have any idea what you're getting yourself into by stepping away from paradise and trying to create your own paradise. Yeah, we can't do that. Only God can do that. With that old poem, only God can make a tree, well, only God can create paradise, right? But nevertheless, here we are. So what happened is we thought we could think a thought outside of the mind of God. And we're still doing it. We're still trying to think a thought outside of the mind of God. You really can't do that. And trying to do that really leads us into lots of unhappiness because we feel that something is missing. Now, the good news is that the moment at which we decided to separate or to leave home, God put into our memory the memory of Him, or of eternity, or spirit, or the Christ mind. There's a lot of synonyms that we could use to describe the same thing. And there's actually a part of us that yearns for this memory to become an alive part of our present thinking. It's the desire to go. Everybody wants to go home. Very often when people are dying, they will say, I want to go home. I want to go home. And this is not home. The body is the ego's chosen home. But we all know it's very temporal. It doesn't last very long. Even 90 years or 100 years, even nothing. In relationship to infinity, doesn't count. Right? But here we are, sort of stuck in this run. Now, at the same time, the Course says that there is still the voice for God. And the voice for God, the Course recognizes as a healed mind. The definition it gives for it is that it's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit represents the voice for God, right? And if we pay attention to that voice and we do what that voice is asking us to do, which is our voice, by the way, there's no separation. It's us in our true self, capital S, self, right? When we follow that direction, and my favorite analogy, and you've probably heard me use this, it's a really good analogy. It works like GPS, except in the Course in Miracles terms, we call it God's Plan for Salvation, GPS. And it's really actually very well described by Jesus in the Gospels. In Matthew, where he says, straight is the way, narrow is the gate which leads into, and it's interesting what it leads into life. And then the line, few there are that go there. Very few get enlightened. Very few really get this. Eventually, we all one of remembering. It's nice to put pieces back together again. Or a word that I like better than remembering is recognizing. Mm-hmm. We will recognize what we already know. And it's like, I knew that all along. It's like when you have an insight, and it's interesting, it's an insight, right? Right. When we have an insight, what we do is we see something that's already there. And it's always been there. It's just now that in fact, if you have an insight and you want to share it with a friend, it's not unusual. You'll have an insight, you'll share it with somebody else, and they'll kind of go, so, you just figured that out? Or they're not ready for it yet, one of the two. So, they don't understand why you're so excited about it because they're not ready for it, or they've already figured it out, one of the two, because it's our insight. It's not. But sharing insights are very, very helpful too, because, that's what you like to do. I like to do. We're authors. We write books. We talk to people. We go to church on Sunday and we listen to somebody else sharing their insights, and we talk about it with each other. So hopefully the main function of the Holy Spirit in terms of the Course is communication. And that's what we're here to do. We're here. That's what we're doing right now, right? Mm-hmm. Whereby, hopefully, we learn, and in addition to our learning, those who read our books or listen to our talking will have some insight themselves, and they'll see something as well. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, great answer. Thank you for that. There's so many things there that I want to go back and touch on. That idea of the higher self, the higher mind, in contrast to that ego mind. Mm-hmm. That's the part, the ego mind is the part that we got into when we left the garden. And that's the part that when you say, we didn't know what we were getting into. Yeah, because that's the part that really, that ego mind of fear, of thinking that we're not enough, of feeling guilty, of carrying all of those inner fears that we have. So when you think about that higher mind then and what it's capable of, if you don't mind talking just a little bit about the creative power of that, since that is the mind of God, that is the Holy Spirit. What are we capable of doing when we use that mind and think with that mind?
Well, the Course in Miracles is very clear. It says the mind is very powerful. You don't begin to realize the incredible power of the mind. It says at one point we can literally move mountains. Right now, don't get too literal about that. We can do incredible kinds of transformations, in part by just being the love that we are.
Mhm.
I mean, just by loving, that can have a tremendous influence on not only the people that are a part of our immediate vicinity, but of course it's sort of get a ripple effect where it goes out, because every mind which we help to heal helps to heal every other mind, and so it goes on and so it goes on. And there's really no end to it. And then we know also just from facts, if you look at the world's greatest records and certain things, people are capable of doing incredible feats, physically and mentally, with just the aid of this mind, memorizing things, making all sorts of, writing the books. And the number of accomplishments are incredible if we apply the principles which are necessary to make that happen. There's a lot of principles that we need to bring into focus. We could talk about that at another point.
Great. Well, it probably would be good to touch on at least a couple of those principles. What are some of the main things that we need to focus on?
Well, for one thing, at one point, the Course in Miracles says, you are very undisciplined. You passively condone your mind's miscreations. And the Course, a phrase that's used quite a bit in the Course, I think 22 times or something like that, I keep records on some of these things, is watch your mind. Watch your mind. And so it's like, watch your mind for its miscreations. Not to watch it for its creations, but watch for the miscreations. We have to watch for the miscreations first so that we can begin to eliminate miscreations from our mind. So miscreation, for example, would be any time that we're angry, that we're attacking, that we're annoyed, that we're upset. See, those are only kind of things that an ego mind would be doing in the first place. So if we're in that state, the Course says at one point that anger is never justified. The word is never. It's never the right choice. So if we see that we're getting angry, we see that we are being angry, a trained mind. Now, the Course in Miracles says on the very first chapter that it's a course in mind training. And if you started doing the workbook lessons from January 1st, where we are in the beginning of January, you can see especially all these early lessons, or lessons like, I want to see differently, right? Mm-hmm. I'm recognizing my miscreations so that I can begin to change them. Right. There's a section of the Course that I really like a lot. In fact, as I ask all my students to memorize it, it's in chapter 21, section 2. It's called The Responsibility for Sight, and I'll quote just 3 sentences. I am responsible for what I see. All right, so seeing is everything. I mean, what am I? Because again, in the section before that, projection makes perception. So if projection makes perception, then I am projecting the world. I say it doesn't mean that I'm making up the cars and the trees and all that, but it does mean that I'm evaluating and I'm judging them, and I'm saying that that's pretty or that's ugly. Keep in mind that good and bad, it doesn't make a difference. Good and bad are both judgments. The Course at one point says a good is kind of a shadow and the bad completely is dark side out. By that I mean, for example, take art. So one person will look at, let's say, a piece of modern art, and they'll say, that's magnificent. And the next person standing next to them says, I don't get it. One likes it, one doesn't get it. They're both judgments that are being made about the same thing because it's being seen differently. Or another phrase we use is, what's good for the goose isn't necessarily good for the gander. It's like, it depends upon who the viewer, who the seer is, right? And it's very important. One of the things that I try to do is to really get people to watch the words that come out of their mouths, because we're always giving ourselves away. And just a couple of quick examples would be things like to say that you're upset about something. So the second one of these, so the first one is, I'm responsible for what I see. The second one line is, I choose the feelings I experience. All right, let's stop right there. I choose the feelings I experience. So who is the I that is choosing to be upset right now? And what is causing the upset? Only an ego can get upset. And what the Course is saying, you're not an ego. You're a child of God, the son of God, the daughter of God, whatever terminology you want to give. You're a spirit. You are the Christ mind. The Christ mind does not get upset over ego concerns. It doesn't have hurt feelings. How could you have a hurt replacement? You hurt my feelings. What? How could you get hurt? Especially if it's not true. Especially if it's a nothing. Even if it's something, then it's a misperception. All right. So it really adds up to nothing. So you get upset, or you're offended, or you're disappointed. What is it that's upset? What is it that's disappointed? Mm-hmm. Projection makes perception. So what am I perceiving? Where am I finding the problem? Now, with the same amount of energy, actually less energy, you could be getting more positive. You could be loving whatever it is you see. Now, that's easy enough with our pets, let's say, or with someone that we love, or a beautiful spring day, or whatever it is that we're loving that we see. But we can't, there's no reason we can't extend that to the crying child, to whatever it is that's going on. We are the choosers. We are the determiners of the world that we see. Now, let me go do the last two phrases in that part I asked everybody to memorize. So I'm responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. I decide upon the goals I would achieve. That's the third part. And then the fourth part is really the heavy-duty part. And that is, I'm responsible for what I see. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for. And I receive as asked. Now, that's the part that gets to be really heavy, because somebody will say, oh, I had cancer back in 2001 and 2002. And I remember when I first got the diagnosis, my first thought was, no, I did not ask. Okay, this is not in my script. I didn't write that, this is not here. This you made a mistake. But I had it. So seeing how I had it, I had to be responsible about it. As it turned out, I had it for a year. I was diagnosed in April. The next April, I was diagnosed with pain. I did 30 weeks of chemo, which wasn't fun. No. It was okay in the beginning. I would say the first 7 sessions, I'm going like, I don't see what the big deal is. But sometime up to session 23, I'm crawling. I am the determiner of everything I see. If you were doing the workbook lessons right now, if you started on the beginning of the year, you're up to the point where I am determined to see. I think that could be today's lesson or tomorrow's lesson. It's lesson 20, I think. So today's 22nd. So it's 2 days ago. So is that kind of answering your question? We're going in the right direction at least.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about that issue of having cancer again, if you don't mind, because I think that's where a lot of people do get tripped up with the teachings of the Course and with the power of our mind. Because as you said, cancer came along and you thought, I didn't ask for this. This is not what I planned on. So how can we make sense of that? How does it fit this teaching?
Well, in my particular case, I had to think, well, why did I? First of all, something happened on the mental level that caused me to get cancer. And I didn't think about it at the time, but I was a minister of a church in New York City at the time. And we were going through a bit of a political, how churches will go through political struggles? Mm-hmm. The kind of hierarchical political stuff was going on. Well, I was saying throughout this whole thing, I'm handling it. I got it. And then I got cancer. And I thought, well, you weren't handling that as well as you thought you were. Mm. In fact, there's a good friend of mine who's a psychologist, wonderful, deeply spiritual man, who's sort of my guide at that time. When he first heard me, the first thing he said to me, "What's eating you?" Mm. And it's interesting he said, "What's eating you?" because I literally had colon cancer. Something was eating away my insides. Then I just had to I had to recognize that I accept the fact that I had it. And it was actually quite a blessing. It was really a wonderful blessing for me, because what I got out of cancer was that it gave me an opportunity to look at death. And to look at death kind of up close, because not only did I have it, but then it turned out it spread, right? So they removed that particular tumor about the size of a lemon, they said. But then they did an exploratory and said, well, it's also going into your lymph nodes now. But I recognized that I could die in the beginning. And I said really early on, actually, the night after I got the diagnosis, okay, I could die. I could really die. I mean, so what? I mean, I'm just going to leave a little sooner than some of my friends are. And I made peace with it. I made peace with it. It's okay to die. I mean, after all, we're all going to do it. So I'm just leaving a little bit earlier. That's all. Bye-bye. And it was interesting. Once I made peace with it, once I said it's okay to die, I realized that I probably wasn't going to die. And what was also interesting was that throughout the whole experience, I never thought I was going to die. And it was like this was an annoyance. It was just like this annoying thing that happened. I had to go once a week and have this stuff, shot into my body. I had to sit there for an hour and let this fluid drain into me. And okay, it was an annoyance. And then toward the end, it was literally made me sick.
Well, I think I really appreciate this conversation, this particular topic, because I think so often when we get into issues of health with the Course, people can take that element of we create everything with our minds and use that to blame themselves,
right,
or to think that it's all about blame, when really it's the complete opposite. Knowing that we create everything means that we are completely empowered to create what we really want rather than what we don't. And I loved what you said about, once that actually having cancer was such a great gift to you, because that's the other part of using our higher mind, I think, is that whatever we do create, we also can see the gifts in it, even if we ended up creating something that we didn't expect, that we created from what the Course would call an unhealed mind or a split mind, that we were still bringing those fears to our experience, and they manifested into something we didn't want. So you've had another health experience too, I understand, that you had encephalitis, that you were bitten by a mosquito, contracted encephalitis, and then you were in a coma for quite a long time. And I read recently one of the things that you had written about when you were in that coma. It was so beautiful what you described. It sounded like a net of lights out in the sky or in space, where every intersection of that net was a light. Could you talk about that a little bit too, and what that meant to you?
Well, it's interesting. It's very interesting about that, because that's the only thing that I really saw. It was like looking up into the heavens and seeing the stars. But there were lights that went from one star to another star, and where they would cross, there'd be a brighter light, right? And actually, this is a very, very, I've since to find out, ancient concept. It goes back to the Rig Veda and to the oldest scripture in the world. There's something that's called Indra's net. And Indra's net is the place at which these crosses happen. And when they cross, and I think our brains probably work a lot like this in terms of the synapses and things going back and forth. There's probably a lot of computer stuff that works like this. I mean, but it's those points are like little energy points. They're also the points from which everything radiates out to everything else. Right? So when we're talking about communication, for example, it's like everything is connected to like everything else in the body. Our bodies are very good examples that are any animal's body or the whole cosmos. So you can't affect one part of it without the whole thing being affected in some way by it. So like if you just recently, I started doing the workbook lessons. Again, I've done them several times, and I just keep doing them because every time I do it, I discover something I hadn't seen before. And actually, I've got it right here next to me. The most recent lessons were There's two. A couple days ago, it was, I am not alone in experiencing the effect of my seeing. Okay, we understand. I'm not alone in it. And the one after it, which was a couple days ago, I am not alone in experiencing the effect of my thoughts. Now think about that. I'm not alone in experiencing the effect of my thoughts. So my thoughts, even though I don't realize it, even though I'm not talking to anyone in particular at the moment, that radiates out, and that's having its effect on everything. Mm-hmm. Just the way I see it, just the way I think of the way I think about it is having its effect. And probably one of the good ways that we can probably experience that is with our animals, with pets, like with dogs. Animals know what we're feeling. If you're depressed or angry, they're going to know it, right? If you're joyful, they're going to know it. I mean, it's on another level. It's not on a verbal communication level. It's on a non-verbal level. But we know, for example, that the dogs can tell when their owners have cancer, or when their owners are sad, or when their owners need help of some sort, right? And they'll come and rest the chin on the knee or something. You know, I know you need a little loving right now. No words are being shared here. We really do this a lot with our mates, for example, or with our employees, or people that we have, our children, people we have a lot of overlapping communication with, and we know there's an unspoken language of something that's going on. So in that sense, thoughts are real things. The Course says you are an idea. So you are an idea in the mind of God, which is a heck of a thought. Mm-hmm. And so is everyone. So is everything that's out there, and it's all connected. Back when I was in seminary back in the 60s, I got fascinated by studying the works of Pierre de Chardin, the French Jesuit paleontologist. He was a little bit of everything: paleontologist, archaeologist, anthropologist, thinker, who got into the concept of evolution. And the Catholic Church, would not allow his works to be published during his own lifetime. Now, of course, it got out, and then he became very, very popular. See, if you want to become really, really popular, just have the Catholic Church condemn your works. Why did they forbid this knowledge to be? Well, it had the opposite effect. But it's very strange, because Chardin, he was a Jesuit priest, developed a concept. Now, he died in 1955. He developed the concept of a World Wide Web, or a net of consciousness, which he thought. Now, keep in mind, he died in 55. There was no such thing as a World Wide Web or an internet. We actually physically brought into being think what you and I are doing right now. It's just incredible. You're at your home in Iowa. I'm home out in New York. We can see each other and talk to each other, and other people can tune in and hear the conversation. It's just phenomenal what's going on. But Chardin saw it happening on a psychic level, not on a physical level. And it is happening on a psychic level. And by psychic, I mean the thought energy form that's going on. So it affects everything. And especially now, in part because of things like the internet, and because of television, and because of the news. So we all know it's affecting the consciousness. When 9/11 happened, it was palpable. You could feel everybody. I remember walking down the street in New York City. I was serving the church at the time in New York City, and people were looking at each other. I mean, people that you don't normally were looking. Everybody was going, "Whoa!" I mean, it's like, and feeling what was going on, what was happening to all of us. Right. I was walking past the fire department a few days after that, and there was a fireman was standing at the door with his boots on. I remember he was just standing there, and I walked past. He said, afternoon father.
Mm.
And later I thought, well, I'm not a father, I'm a minister, but how did he know?
Mm. Mm.
How do you know?
Right.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And yet he said that.
So what you're saying is so vitally important. The fact that there is this connectiveness. I loved what you said about that. You made the point about thoughts being things, because we so often think about them as just being these nebulous things that run through our minds that don't necessarily have any power to them at all. But what you're saying is one of the key teachings of the Course and of other teachings as well, that they are real, and that the more that we need to give them our attention, we need to become aware of what's going on in our minds so that we are actually contributing to a more loving, a more peaceful, a more joyful experience for all, not just for ourselves, but for that oneness, for that whole. So I know our time is kind of coming to a close. We could talk for hours, and I wish we had hours because I'm enjoying this so much. But one final question, and that would be for people who are reading A Course in Miracles or studying it. The workbook, as you've mentioned, is such a powerful way to stay in touch with these teachings every single day. But for people who may not be studying the Course or may not be drawn to it right now, is there something else that you would suggest that could help them stay in that higher mind or come to it more regularly?
Sure. Well, there are ways, I think, that very simple ways of being aware of it. One of the simplest ways is there's a line in the Course where it says, peace comes to the quiet mind. Mm-hmm. So you want to think about, when am I experiencing a quiet mind? Here's a couple of times I'm going to suggest be very aware of what you're getting, if it's not a communication, right? Mm-hmm. One is when we wake up in the morning. Before you get up, before you get out of bed, hopefully you don't just jump up and I highly recommend people do not wake up with alarm clocks. If you have to, you have to. But if you can, let it be natural. And just lay there and see what's coming to you during this time. And I get some of my best ideas are I keep a piece of paper and a pen, very near on the dresser, and I'll get titles and ideas. There's another very similar time, which is very close to that same time, and that's when you're in the shower. So you're in the shower, you're literally kind of being baptized. This is all pouring, you're being cleansed, right? Right. And probably have your eyes, and just sort of see what's coming to you. You haven't got involved in the busyness of the day yet, but here you are being baptized, being washed clean, and see what the thoughts are, and see if you're not getting some sort of direction and something that you should pay attention to, probably something that you should call so-and-so to. Whatever the thoughts are that are coming to you, pay a lot of attention to those. The other time would be exactly the opposite of that. And the exactly opposite of that is when things are really going crazy, when there's a disturbance in the force, so to speak, whether an automobile accident. Now what's going on? What do I need to look at here? I just ran off the road or whatever it was. Was I not paying better? Why was I not paying more attention? So all those options. Actually, we know from experience, we know from surveys, that more people wake up, really kind of an awakening experience as a result of crash and burn experiences than in any other way.
Really?
So it's like more people will stop drinking alcohol, for example, because they wake up in a hospital or they're in an accident, or hopefully not one that hurt other people, or themselves terribly, but a marriage falls apart. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, and then you kind of got to whoa, what's my part in this? Don't go blaming it all on the other. If I go blaming it all on the other, I'm not seeing, because it takes two. Carl Jung talked about this in terms of what we call shadow work. And shadow work means that just whenever things are not working well, the Course in Miracles would say, stop. Just really, really stop. Go the other way. Mm-hmm. There's actually a line in the Course in Miracles where it talks about you're in a couple situation and an argument begins. It says, the one who's saner at the moment.
Yep, I love that.
The one
Yes.
thing at the moment should be the one that kind of steps in, not to argue, but to go the other way.
Yeah, bring it
Right.
back to peace and love and light
Bring it
again.
back.
You're right, right.
Bring it back. Right.
Well, I think that place of that message, stop and go the other way, is probably a good place for us to stop for today, although I would love to keep going. And hopefully we'll get to do this again because there's so much more to talk about. But you've touched on such key principles with the power of the mind. I appreciate your time and your wisdom in this so very much. I do want to encourage everyone out there listening to check out Jon and what he does, his books, his teachings, his online courses at miraclesmagazine.org. And you can find out more too about Be the Light That You Are, my latest book, and my events and courses and all of those things too at debraengle.com. So again, Jon, thank you. Blessings to you in all of your travels and all of your work that's shining the light so much in this world. Thank you. And thank you to
I always enjoy coming to you.
Oh, don't go ahead.
No, that's it. I always enjoy coming to Iowa because I know I get to stop, have an evening with you guys.
Anytime. We just love it when you come. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, and thank you to everybody who's watching. Blessings to you as well, and keep your light shining too. So, thank you again all very much. Peace to you, Jon. Thank you.
Thank you.